Mike Roberts here for Grain and Graze 2. For South Australian cropping and livestock farmer Ryan Simpson, introducing Vetch into his rotation has made a huge difference to his viability and profitability as a farmer. We caught up with Ryan to find out how he does it, why he does it, and what the benefits are to his business.
This farm is in the mid-north,
Yep.
which is approximately 2.5 hours north of Adelaide. Rainfall, Jamestown's about 475 millimetres. We've been here since 1902 on the 5th generation Simpson farmer.
Yep.
I'm a wheat, sheep, canola, barley, vetch farmer, so a mixed enterprise farming.
Yep.
It's a red-brown earth over clay, loam, soil type. So yes, my livestock, so I'm a 1500 breeding ewes.
Yep.
With self-replacing merinos. Do 3/4 to merinos, and then my old 5.5-year-old ewes, I will put a white Suffolk merino ram over them, anything that I don't like to put back into my mob, and breed crossbred lamb out of that. September shearing.
Yep.
So and then my lambs will be, say, 6 weeks later, October, mid-October, I'll shear my lambs, merino lambs.
Yep.
At the moment, I've sold all my crossbred lambs, so I like to get them out in springtime. 90% sold off their mum, straight off mum, and then my merino lambs I tend to shear, my weather lambs, and then carry them through to December, January, and then sell them off as the market peaks, or if you get full contract pricing. The way the program works is I'm an April-May lambing, so I lamb in April-May, so that is a huge demand on feed. It's nice time of the year, beautiful time of the year for our area, like cool nights, but warm days, but generally not a lot of rainfall. So the feed at that time of the year is probably short, but it's a good lambing time. So that's where I like to obviously have surplus feed, grain and hay that I will feed out my sheep pre-lambing and lambing time, that time of the year. So the feed gap will end in, say, June, and then I'll sow feed, like the vetch I will sow, and that probably doesn't get ready until that July, before I can wean lambs or put sheep on that in probably July, August, and then that's when I start to load up all my lambs on my self-sown feed. Wean them out of my hills, out of my non-arable country, wean the lambs onto self-sown feed. The stubbles run out in the end of March, so like 4 or 5 months of stubble feeds over your cropping country, sheep, and then you bring them back into your hills, into your non-arable hills, and then you lamb there for that April, May, June, 3 months of where the obviously paddocks are in crop. You don't have the feed in paddocks. When they're lambing, you're supplementing them with hay and grain while you're lambing in the hills. And then once you get old enough, 12 weeks, give or take, you can wean your lambs, then onto self-sown feed. I will grass-free my vetch, because I use my vetch as a rotation in my cropping program, as well as a feed gap for my sheep. So that's where the one key is for vetch at the moment. It gives me a great source of feed and protein for my sheep and lambs, but it also gives me a very good cleaning crop for my wheat the following year, and nitrogen fixation. First rain in April, generally give or take a few weeks. That Anzac Day is generally the break of the season in our area, and I will be prepared to sow vetch any time from then. So I'll dry sow it, then obviously the opening rain, the feed it'll germinate the vetch and get a good early growth. I will use chemicals to spray my grasses out later on in that June, July, as the vetch goes in the spring, and then I will spray it out, like crop top it later on, and desiccate it in October, and then it dries off, so I don't get any seed set, weed seeds, or any vetch going to seed for my cropping rotation, and hay freezes the vetch for my lambs. A typical rotation in my cropping program would be a vetch, wheat, wheat or vetch, wheat, barley, back into vetch again, like every 3 years, just a simple rotation. In a good production year like 2013, where I had good winter rainfall, good growth, I was able to cut my vetch down for hay. So I had paddocks where I fenced off and left particularly for hay and grain this year. So I was able to go through and cut the vetch down and then roll it up into round bales of hay, and obviously I like to feed them out over that summer period and lambing period. On a good year like 2013, good growth amount of feed, I was able to increase my stocking rates this year by buying in weather lambs from other places, so therefore I could utilise the vetch by increasing my stocking rates up. If in droughts I will have enough feed where maybe I'll have a minimal amount of stock, a conservative amount of lambs on the ground, knowing that I can, being a reasonably reliable area, I'll know I'll be able to run my lambs through and wean them enough so I can get rid of my weather lambs or any surplus sheep in a dry period in that September market, and then I'll still be able to carry my ewes, maintain my ewes, always keep my breeding ewes levels to the same, but I will offload any of my weather lambs or surplus sheep. So I do use herbicides on my vetch, so a typical chemical I would use is the Roundup Treflin, followed by Simpson, post-emergent after sowing on my vetch, and then later on I'll come in with a select herbicide, grass herbicide, and spray the grasses out, and then come back later on in October with Roundup and hay freeze and crop top all of the vetch. So the key areas I see in my vetch rotation is that it gives me a stopgap for feed. I'm able to graze, cut for hay, reap grain, and also it gives me a great break crop rotation. I don't have to have the risk of frost, of lone rainfall, spring rainfall, where grain, legumes around here can go pear-shaped pretty quickly with frost. So it's a low risk crop for me. I've always got the sheep there so I can utilise the feed. It grows, and then the nitrogen it puts back into my soil the following year. I'm saving on fertiliser costs. I'm also storing moisture because you're not producing grain, that it will always harvest a better crop on a vetch stubble over a canola stubble or a pea stubble or a legume stubble because you've stored moisture. The only negative is the retaining seed. It is sometimes hard to get seed from your vetch crop, so you'll have to, generally we always say 1 in 3 years you have to leave a certain paddock out to reap the grain. You always keep a couple of years of seed up. You like to retain your own seed because you know what weeds you've got, and if you had to go outside your own area then you bring the risk of bringing in other weeds. I've been running the Vetch program for 10 years now, so I've seen some good years and seen some drought years with it, and overall it's been above, or probably my most profitable legume crop over a 10-year period, over your canola and your grain legumes, because it's a low risk, low input cost, and it suits my farming enterprise with a sheep, wheat cropping rotation. So before I used to grow vetch, you used to have your pastures. You used just to leave out pastures and have regenerating clover and medic pastures. And just finding that I wasn't able to have the same stocking rates as I was 10 years ago without growing vetch as I am now. Even though you still have to sow the pastures every year, but the extra feed you're gaining outweighs the self-sown medic pastures in my experience. Yep. The increased stocking rates is probably 50%, I'd say, by growing my vetch stocking rates, just because you're getting a lot more bulk and a lot more dry matter growth. Yeah, well, just probably as you learn more, you get into probably higher intensive grazing, where you cell grazing and get into more intense farming it, like the higher the pressure you put on it, then it grows back. So by cell grazing you're getting, you're able to, the likes of this year, leave a paddock for seed. I didn't have to graze that one particular part, so I was able to reap seed off of that. Another paddock I was able to cut hay, and the other two paddocks, divide a 100-acre paddock into four lots, I was able to graze them back and forth from that paddock. So the advice I'd give with where I've learnt in growing vetch would be to get the vetch in early, dry sow it. So the more growth you got, the more dry matter and more stock you're able to graze the paddock. So, and then you still got to use weed control, grass-free your vetch, and so it sets up your paddock for the following year, and you'll gain a lot of benefits by grass-freeing your vetch. You'll gain that nitrogen, your cleanness, and you'll also gain the following year on your cereal crops. Yeah, I suppose with the most exciting part about growing vetch is that you're excited when you see your lambs as you're bringing your lambs in for shearing in September, and you see the extra growth and how fresh and round they look, and able to get them up quicker, so therefore you can produce more lambs because you're not carrying them as long.
So there you have it. If you're a mixed farmer who finds growing some of the traditional grain legumes a little bit risky in your area, perhaps vetch is something that you ought to consider. There's another reason for Ryan Simpson having a look at vetch and introducing it to his rotation. He's got a young family, and securing the long-term future and viability of his farm is very important.
So this is Hamish Simpson. He's the next generation farmer. So this is, we're teaching him how to farm at the moment. So that's why we like farming, and we like to explore different things. And by saying, say, vetch, and we love our sheep, we want our boys to be farmers, and we like diversifying and trying new things to give these next generation a farm so they can farm.